This is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this video I'd like to provide students with some help in studying Lesson 13 in the Academy's Latin vocabulary course. You can see up at the top of the page here we have the chapter number indicated in the Roman numeral. Lesson 13, you see the subject in Latin is arbor, arbor, which in English is translated as tree. So in Chapter 13 we're going to study Latin vocabulary that's related to trees. So let's go ahead and walk through this reading. We've got a picture here of a tree upright and another tree fallen. And you can see that there are numbers on that picture. We're not going to look at these in this video, but you can see that there are items numbered in the picture, and those numbers can be found throughout the Latin text. So you can look up to the picture and try to see what the lesson is talking about. But we're going to go through and make sure that the pronunciation of the Latin is clear and that the understanding of the English translation is also clear. So let's begin and look through Lesson 13 on the tree in Latin vocabulary. The Latin begins with the first sentence, planta procrescit e semine. Planta procrescit e semine. And over in the English we can see planta is translated a plant. The verb procrescit, procrescit, is translated grows or groweth. If you look at the verb procrescit, pro, that preposition, which is a prefix here, means forward or forth, and crescit in Latin means to grow. So really, if we want to be more accurate, procrescit means to grow forth. So the plant grows forth e semine. We can see that this small word, this preposition e, is translated from. In Latin, this is an abbreviated form of the word ex. Ex means out of or from. So a plant grows forth out of or from semine, semine, which is translated a seed. A plant grows forth from a seed. Planta procrescit e semine. Next we read planta habit in fruticem. Planta habit in fruticem. We again see planta. We know that that means a plant. And then we see habit, habit, and we see it's translated in English as waxeth, waxeth, which is another expression for growing. So a plant grows in fruticem, in fruticem. We see the preposition in is translated to or into. And then fruticem, fruticem is translated shoot. That's the part of a plant that grows up from the ground, the shoot. Planta habit in fruticem. Then we read frutex in arborem. Frutex in arborem. Frutex is the nominative form of the noun that we see in its accusative form, fruticem. So fruticem and frutex are actually the same noun in two different cases. Frutex is the nominative case, fruticem is the accusative case. Frutex in arborem. And we can see that there's no verb in this part of the sentence here because it's using the verb from the first part of the sentence, habit. So a plant waxeth or groweth into a shoot, and here we see a shoot grows in arborem, grows to or into a tree, arborem. This word arborem is the accusative case of the noun that we see at the top of the lesson, arbor. Arbor is the nominative case, arborem is the accusative case. Same word, same noun. It refers to tree. So A plant grows into a shoot, and a shoot grows into a tree. Arborem. Next we read, radix sustentat arborem. Radix sustentat arborem. Radix is the Latin noun that translates as root. If in English you hear the word radical, like we're going to make some radical changes, that word radical comes from this word radix, which means root. So a radical change means a change that goes all the way down to the root of the issue. We're not just going to change some details on the surface. We're going to get to the root of this problem. That's what it means to be radical. Radix, the root. We then have the verb sustentat, sustentat, and it's translated here in English as bears up, or holds up. Another word in English is sustains. That more directly comes from sustentat. The root, sustentat arborem, bears up the tree. The root bears up the tree. Next we read, stirps or stemma surgit e radice. Stirps, stemma, surgit e radice. So the Latin word stirps is translated as the body of the plant. The body of the plant is the stirps, and another name for this is stemma, which is easy to remember because the English is stem. So the stirps or stemma surgit e radice. Surgit means to rise up, and we see rises. And then we have e, which again we saw before up here. E means from or out of. And then radice is another case, another form of the noun radix. So we have radice and radix are two different cases of the same noun. Radix is the nominative form. Radice is the ablative case. Stirps surgit e radice. The body of the plant rises from the root. Next, stirps se dividit in ramos et frondes factas e foliis. Stirps se dividit in ramos et frondes. So we see stirps again. We saw that before. It's translated as stem here, the stem. Se means itself. Stirps se itself. Dividit, divides. Stirps se dividit. The stem divides itself in ramos et frondes, into ramos, boughs, et frondes, branches. And notice that the English translation adds green branches or young, fresh branches. So we have boughs, ramos, and green branches, frondes. On a quiz on this lesson, it will be okay for frondes if you just write branches. Okay? So the stirps or stem divides itself into boughs, ramos, et frondes, branches. And these are factas e foliis. Factas e foliis. These are made, factas. Think a factory is a place that makes something. Factas means made. E means out of or from. Here it's translated of. And foliis means leaves. So the stem divides itself into boughs and branches which are made of leaves. In the fall, when the leaves turn red and orange and gold, we refer to the leaves as the foliage. Foliage. That comes from the Latin word foliis. Let's move on to the next page. This continues. Cacumen est in sumo. Cacumen est in sumo. Cacumen refers to the top of the treetop. Est in sumo, is in, And then sumo means the height. The top of the tree is in the height. Cacumen est in sumo. Truncus adherat radicibus. Truncus adherat radicibus. Truncus is obviously translated as the trunk, but here in our lesson it's translated as stock. The stock of the tree. The stock adherat. Adherat means stays close to or sticks to. To adhere to something is to stay close to it or to stick to it. So the trunk of the tree or the stock of the tree, adherat, is close. Radicibus. And this is another case, another form of the word radix, which means root. Here it means to the roots. Radicibus, to the roots. The truncus adherat radicibus. The stock is close to the roots. Next we read caudex. Caudex est stipes dejectus. Caudex est stipes dejectus. Caudex is translated as a log. A log est stipes. A log is the body or the stem, but here it's better to say body because we're talking about a tree. We're talking about a log. A log is the body, est stipes, felled down or cut down, cast down. That's the Latin dejectus. If I say that someone is dejected, it means that they're sad. It means that they're down, that they're cast down emotionally. They're dejected. That's the word here for a tree that's been cut down, and a log is the body of the tree that has been cut down. Sine ramis means without, sine, ramis, without boughs. The boughs have been cut off, and all that's left is the body of the tree, which is a log. Stipes dejectus. Sine ramis, without boughs. Habens corticem et librum pulpam et medullam. Habens corticem et librum pulpam et medullam. So the log of the tree contains or is having corticem, which means bark, the bark of the tree, the outside. Librum, which is the rind of the tree. Pulpam, which is pith. And medullam, which is the heart of the tree. Now, you don't need to know what these things are. This is for biology class. But make sure you simply learn the four parts of the body of the tree. The corticem, the librum, the pulpam, and medullam, and their translation as bark, rind, pith, and heart. Next up, viscum ad nascitor ramis. Viscum ad nascitor ramis. This word viscum is translated as bird lime, and that's not something that we're familiar with today. It's a sticky, thick substance. I don't know that we want to call it sap, because sap is something different. And we see there's a couple other terms listed below that we're going to look at. But viscum is usually a thick substance. It's like a liquid, but it's thick. Like motor oil is viscous. It's thick. The thicker something is, the more viscous it is. So viscum is translated bird lime. And I recommend you take a minute and look up bird lime in a dictionary to see what that refers to. But the idea is simply a thick substance that grows upon the boughs of the trees. Ad nascitor. Ad nascitor, again, is translated grows. So we've had three different verbs that basically translate as grows in this lesson, which isn't very helpful. But here, if we look at the word ad nascitor, nascitor means is grown. Is grown, nascitor, and ad here means upon. So ad nascitor means is grown upon, and then ramis, we've already seen that. We've seen ramos in a little earlier in the lesson, which means boughs. Here we have ramis, a different form of that word. Qui etiam sudant, the boughs, that's the subject of this next part of the sentence, the boughs which, qui, etiam, also, sudant. Sudant is a verb that means to sweat. And we think of sweating as humans, but it's simply when any sort of liquid comes from an object, we can say that that object is sweating. That object, sudant, it sweats, or they sweat. The branches here, the boughs are said to sudant, or sweat. And what do they sweat? They sweat a number of different substances. A number of different substances come from the boughs of the tree. One of them is gumi, which is translated gum. Another, resinam, which is translated rosin or resin. And another is pitchem, which is translated pitch. If you're interested in identifying these different substances in detail, I recommend you just look them up in a dictionary. These are not our concern in Latin vocabulary. So that's all for lesson 13. Let me just read through the Latin one more time so you can hear the pronunciation, and then you can get working on studying the vocabulary. This is lesson 13 on arbor, or a tree. Planta procrescit e semine. Planta habit in fruticem. Frutex in arborem. Radix sustentat arborem. Stirps aut stemma surgit e radice. Stirps se dividit in ramos et frondes, factas e foliis. Cacumen est in sumo, truncus adherat radicibus. Caudex est stipes dejectus, sine ramis. Habens corticem et librum, pulpam et medullam. Viscum ad nascitor ramis, qui etiam sudant gumi, resinam, pitchem, etc. And notice this last little expression here. We see this all the time in English. We'll see etc. period, and we say etc. Some people wrongly say etc., which makes no sense because x means out of. It means and the others. Et means and. Cetera means the others or the rest. So et cetera, etc. period means and the rest. When we're making a list and we don't want to list everything, we end the list by just saying et cetera, and the rest. And you can see that that expression is symbolized here with this symbol that's called an ampersand, which symbolizes the Latin word et, and then a C with a period for cetera, et cetera. So that's all for lesson 13. I hope that's helpful. There will also be a printable exposition for this lesson, which will help you to study, but I hope that this helps you with the pronunciation and your first walk through the English translation. If you have any questions about this lesson, please post them on the student forum on the Latin vocabulary course page. God bless your studies.